I would like to talk about Ilse Aichinger, an Austrian novelist and poet who should be much better known in the United States because without doubt she is a brilliant writer of the 20th century. Here we need to go look a little into the history because Ilse Aichinger comes into the existence after World War II, the absolute disaster of Europe and especially of Germany. In 1945, everything was destroyed. Houses, poets, buildings, and everything that is connected to it. Ilse Aichinger comes into her own at that very moment. 1945 was the beginning of the end. That is to say, there were no writers, there were no poets, and only destruction of the world. I should mention Günther Eich, who happens to be Ilse Aichinger's husband. And he has written a poem called Inventory that I would like for everybody to remember, because the inventory tells us there is nothing anymore in 1945 after World War II. What does he do, since he cannot talk about ideas, he cannot talk about the beauty of the world? So he mentions just what is left. There is a towel, there is a cap, there is a knife, there is another object that he would like to mention, and so that's the only thing that we have at this point in 1945. However, at the same time, some of the writers, including Ilse Aichinger, decided that they should come together, some of the more established writers, and they founded what has become a very visible and very well-known group, namely the Group 47. Frequently 1947 is referred to as the 0 hour because there's nothing more. And here is Ilse Aichinger, who comes into focus, who comes into her own as one of the most intelligent, most powerful writers. And I would like to focus this time on a short story for which she has become known in the entire world. And the short story title is Der Gefesselte, the Bound Man. I want to use the bound man not only to talk about the unusual story, the unusual structure, and the unusual effect of the story, but also to show something that I have developed, and I call it horizontal reading. And I want to demonstrate this within the short story Der Gefesselte, the Bound Man. What does it mean? The Bound Man is an unusual short story because the bound man comes into existence all of a sudden. He is there, roped all over his body and surrounded by flies lying on the ground. We do not know where he comes from. We have no idea what his background is, where his family is, etc., etc. And so he comes into existence as an unknown, and actually he exits at the end, he exits as an unknown human being. We don't know where he is going. So the whole story is built on the interaction of the rope and his body. And within that restriction, the bound man is capable actually to develop a power that allows him to kill an animal. He also becomes involved because of the unusual situation of his body on the rope. He does become involved in presenting himself in a circus. So he becomes the attraction of the circus, and then the whole development is fine and the people come to watch him in the circuit. However, at the end, when they so become interested in how he can act within the circus, somebody cuts his rope, and at that moment he loses all the power. He shoots the animal that he was supposed to interacting with. He shoots the animal and then disappears into the dark. We don't know where he's going, we don't know where he came from, and we don't know where he's going. For me, particularly interesting is, however, to apply what I call the horizontal reading, demonstrating it in this story of the bound man. What does it mean? In the digital age, we are now in a situation and in a moment where we can look at texts, whether they're visual or even musical, from a totally different point of view. What I have done, I have go to the first paragraph of The Bound Man, and I have chosen two words. One is the rope and one is play. And I realize later on that the rope and the play are continuously repeated within the story. What I wanted to show then, any kind of good writing depends on the repetition, but not on the exact repetition. So if I follow the reappearance of rope each time, I can show that Ilse Aichinger in each case has given me a repetition, but at the same time each repetition is different. That means that I, as the reader, have to refine my sensibility, my perception, so I can follow this throughout the story. Probably the rope is repeated at least 20 times in the story, and from the beginning to the end, then my understanding of the rope takes an expanded comprehension and an expanded experience of the story. I do the same with the word play that is at the beginning in the first paragraph too. Each time the play is repeated, I want to see how that repetition has ingeniously expanded and changed by Ilse Aichinger. And that is obviously the creativity of the writer, because any repetition that is the same throughout the story will probably fail rather extensively at the end of the story. There is a film and a movie called Amadeus, and that is another demonstration of Mozart, again, the other composer who is repeating the same moment in the music each time the same, and then Mozart comes into play, and each time he gives the repetition a slight nuance, and therefore is extremely successful in bringing that moment and that piece of music to life. What I am suggesting in the digital age then is that we should look at writing, at texts, not as an object upon which we proliferate, but we look at the text all of a sudden that we can establish a dialogue with the text, and by that we will continuously be involved in recreating the text from the inside. One can use other words, expressions, metaphors in any given text and follow them through the text. What this does then, after we have done that, we are in a position to then reread the text, and we are beginning to understand the complexity of the text, and I think we are intensifying the experience of the text. So we are not reading the text, we are not just interpreting the text, we are beginning to experience the text. And this is in line what Nabokov said: there is only one kind of reading, and that is rereading.